Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I wanted to talk about my biggest off-season winners and losers in the NBA with the focus on what I do best, which is trade stuff and free agency stuff. I have 4 winners and 3 losers from this offseason that I felt like did the best or the worst for themselves over the last week and a half or so of one of the weirdest NBA off seasons that we've ever had. But quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, all throughout the NBA offseason, so it's a great place for consistent NBA content. You can also leave a like rating on the video, helps me out a ton, lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and helps get it out to more people on YouTube as well. And you can hang out with me at the various socials at the bottom of the screen outside of these videos. Now, with that said, let's go and get to our first winner, and this shouldn't come as much of a surprise. This team got their own individual video, and it is the LA Lakers. And this is partially just because of what they did to improve their team, but also because of where my expectations were at in their ability to improve their team and then how much they actually did improve. I've talked about them a ton. I don't really feel like I need to go over them too much here, but they do definitely need to be in the winners section of this video. Bringing in Dennis Schroeder via trade and keeping Kyle Kuzma in that trade, just at least keeping someone, you know, that was a part of the rotation last year, was a huge win. They also bring in guys like Marc Gasol, Wes Matthews in free agency. They bring in Montrezl Harrell in free agency, which not only helps them, provides them a nice little scoring punch off the bench so that they can rest guys like Anthony Davis and LeBron James throughout what will be a more condensed regular season while still having the same level of offense, or at least, you know, a similar level of offense. But not only that, but they also take him away from the LA Clippers. They weaken another team that is looking to be one of their big rivals for next season as well. So huge winners there for the Lakers. Again, I talk about them a ton. I don't feel the need to go over them too much. Now we move over, though, to the loser category. And first up there is the Detroit Pistons. I made a video about them as well, just kind of talking about the fact that the way that they're building this roster just doesn't make a ton of sense unless there's some mystery Blake Griffin trade potentially in the works here that could really drastically improve this roster. They simply have too many people in the front court and overpaid 2 players specifically, not only Mason Plumlee, but also Jeremy Grant, I think, won't be as effective there as he was in Denver, because it looks like he's going to be more focused on the offensive side of the ball and having a bigger role there in Detroit. And that was one of the reasons why he wanted to be in Detroit in the first place. But ultimately, I think that is a poor decision on their part to pay him that level of money when they're certainly not going to be a competing team next season. And just in general with this roster, I don't feel great about it for next year, and I felt like they have handicapped themselves a little bit moving forward with some of these contracts in an unnecessary way, and they were acting like a team that's close, you know, to an 8th seed appearance in the Eastern Conference, and I simply don't believe that to be the case. And it looks like we could have a Blake Griffin trade in the works here, which would make me feel a little bit better about their future prospects. But overall, I don't think it was a great offseason for Detroit. Next up now in the winner category has to be the Portland Trailblazers. And the biggest piece here is certainly that they brought in Robert Covington, a player that they've needed on this roster for a while, a wing player that can defend and can shoot and just really fills a void in this roster, as I said, that has been there for a little bit for this group. Now, depending on whether or not he stays healthy, will have a huge, you know, deal to do with how this offseason ends up working out for them in the longer term. But they also brought in other players, guys like Kerry Giles, guys like Derek Jones. I just feel like they have a leaner, they have a more athletic roster, and they have a roster that should be better on the defensive end. We know that they have plenty of offense with guys like Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and now, you know, more floor spacing as well with someone like Robert Covington. So the Trailblazers are going from a team that I saw as kind of in the back half of the playoff picture in the West next year, and now transitioning more towards a team that could compete for a top 6, a top 5 seed in the West with these improvements to their roster. That wasn't something I was anticipating going into the offseason, and huge props to them putting them in the winners category. Next up now in the loser category, I think kind of has to be the Charlotte Hornets, and it's simply because of the Gordon Hayward contract. They put themselves in a situation where they've already agreed to this deal with Hayward, and it's a significant overpay, as pretty much everybody knows. $30 million a year for the next 4 years, given the injury history, given the age, things like that for Gordon Hayward. He certainly can have a good year for them, but I don't think there's a scenario in which he is going to provide them that level of value. Now, it's the Hornets. They have to overpay to get players, and I get that, but this conversation has already been kind of, had for everybody, right? Everybody kind of agrees that the Gordon Hayward contract isn't great, but one of the other things that's kind of come to light over the last couple of days is that they agreed to the contract, and now they're exploring options to actually be able to make that contract happen, specifically with Nicolas Batum. Initially, I guess the idea was that they were going to stretch Batum's contract over the next 3 years, basically making it $9 million a year for the next 3 rather than 27 for this year and then completely off the books. And now they're exploring other options, whether that be, dumping him in a sign and trade and just sending him other places so that they can outright sign Gordon Hayward without stretching that contract. And it just would have been nice if they had gone ahead and had plans to do that before signing Hayward, because there's no reason now for any team in the league to want to help them out to bring in Hayward. Hayward's going to be there regardless, but stretching Nicolas Batum and essentially raising the value of Hayward's contract up to $39 million a year when you account for the dead money of the Batum's contract as well is definitely not ideal if you are Charlotte. Now, as we move back over to the winner category, I think we have to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, a team that amongst all of the first round picks that have been traded this offseason, I think we've kind of forgotten about how well New Orleans has done this offseason. Of course, it centers around the fact that they did finally move on from Jrue Holiday. That's a guy that they have, struggled to make available and been hesitant to make available in trade talks over the last 1.5 to 2 years. And finally, they pulled the trigger on trading away Holiday and successfully created, as we talked about in a video a few days ago, successfully created a bidding war amongst a handful of teams that really raised the price of Jrue Holiday way higher than I think anybody ever anticipated that it would be. But they also, of course, get all of those picks from Milwaukee, 3 picks, as well as 2 pick swaps in the future. And then they also ended up acquiring Steven Adams in a trade as well. So this is a team that has stockpiled assets. They still have players like Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams that they could flip later down the road, in addition to those additional first-round picks, in addition to the other picks that they already had coming into this offseason, and a group that still looks competitive. They were able to retain Brandon Ingram in free agency. As long as Zion is healthy this year, this can still be a competitive potential top 8 team in the West this upcoming season. Or they could kind of go the Oklahoma City route of just continue to dump some of their more valuable players, veterans, guys like Eric Bledsoe, guys like Steven Adams. It was a little bit odd that they traded for Adams and then signed him to a 2-year extension, because I kind of felt like they were just going to play him for the 2 years that they had him and then, maybe move on to someone like Jackson Hayes, who was a high pick last year. But they've got Steven Adams now locked up on a longer term deal. We'll see how that works out. But overall, I think the Pelicans deserve a little bit more love for what they've done this offseason to this point. Last up now in the loser category is the San Antonio Spurs. And the reason they're here is simply because there's just been a lack of moves there in San Antonio. And I expected a bit more of a shakeup to the roster, whether that involved a DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge trade. I didn't really know, if that was going to be the case or not. But I just thought that they were going to do something. I didn't expect like a huge free agency splash or a huge trade, but just the lack of moves for a roster that clearly needs a bit of a shakeup was disappointing for me. And now they're going to be going into a season in which Aldridge and DeRozan are both free agents in 2021. They've got a ton of younger guards that they need to figure out, who they want to keep and who they don't. Maybe there'll be some moves during the season for San Antonio, but I was just a little bit disappointed that they were so passive and that they weren't actively looking to make improvements to this roster. Maybe it just turned out to be really difficult because either Aldridge or DeRozan didn't have a ton of trade value, or they simply didn't want to trade those guys. Whatever the case may be, again, just a little bit disappointed there in San Antonio. That's why I put them in the loser category. And then last up now in the winner category is a team that I'm actually going to be making a video about in a negative sense here within the next couple of days. But as an overall, from an overall standpoint this offseason, I think the Oklahoma City Thunder are certainly winners. When you look at all of the pieces that they have flipped and how many first-round picks that they have acquired this offseason, they have done an awesome job. I think overall, when you look at what they got in exchange for Chris Paul, not only in that initial deal, but then in the trades later on when they traded away Rubio and Kelly Oubre, I think they've done really well for themselves, and they have a handful of young players that are going to get significant opportunities next season to potentially be, key development pieces for this group. And they still have some assets that they can flip down the road as well. Someone like Al Horford, if he has a good season, could be a valuable trade piece next offseason to get even more first-round picks. Now, as I said, I'm kind of rolling around a video right now, working through the details of talking about how this could be a negative thing for Oklahoma City, the amount of first-round picks that they have. But I think overall, you kind of have to consider them winners at this point. If you're a Thunder fan, if you're just a fan of the NBA, I don't see how they couldn't be winners given the amount of assets they have gotten in return via trades and some of the free agency stuff they did this offseason as well. Love what Oklahoma City has done. So those are my winners and losers of the 2020 NBA offseason. In the winners category, we have the Lakers, Blazers, Pelicans, and Thunder, all teams that I feel like got significantly better with those first two teams, as far as teams that are looking to compete next year, had limited assets to be able to improve their roster and managed to do so anyway. And then with those last two teams, these are just younger rosters that are accumulating assets, whether they be draft picks or future veterans that they can flip as well, and really, have a bright future, with the Pelicans being a team that I think could be a surprise team next year in the present. And then in the loser category, we've got Detroit, we've got Charlotte, and San Antonio. The first two reason being is just because of the contracts that they've given out this offseason. I simply don't agree with the value, the return on the investment that they've put into those players. And then the last team for San Antonio, it's just a lack of activity and a bit too much, passiveness for me as far as, what the Spurs have or haven't done in this roster. I think there are moves that needed to be made, and ultimately they weren't, and that's why I'm going to call them a loser in this offseason. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.